Hello,
Rabbi, good afternoon.
Raj.
So great to see you. How are you? How's your day going?
It's going great. It's going great. I heard you had some dreams about Matthew.
Oh, I've been dreaming about Matthew all day. So wouldn't you say that the Messianic, so God made promises to multiple people, but again, some of the promises made to Abraham is not the same kind of promise God made to Noah, or the promises God made to Joseph. Abraham was specific, and it's a certain kind of promise, not, again, I don't quite know the exact technical
Sounds like
term.
you're trying to differentiate between promises made to Noah and promises made to Abraham. So what are you trying to?
Well, okay, I'll have to refer back to Rabbi Sachs. I remember again in his books he speaks as how again that the promises made to Abraham were land and children, or land and nations, and those were different. I mean, yes, they're all promises, but this is a certain kind of promise. So um, it's been a while. I'll have to refer back to his to what he
Okay.
calls
So
it.
what's the import of what you're trying to point out? That
So the point is, right, then it makes perfect sense that the genealogy starts with Abraham and David. Because if Matthew's gospel showed that Jesus was a messianic king, that he is a fulfillment of all the promises, fulfillment as in um, the messianic fulfillment of all again the fulfillment of all the messianic promises, then it makes then I can see why he will start with again that this is the son of that the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David and the son of
right,
Abraham.
and I feel like as a Christian, you'd probably the most important thing is probably not only to see that there's a genealogy, but to differentiate from Luke. Right, the Gospel
Yeah.
according to Luke has it starting with Adam, and the one from Adam, again, like you have to take a stab at it, probably has to do with this is the fulfillment of human history. This is Adam was created from point A in order to get to point Z, which is Jesus. And while Matthew, as scholars point out, has a more Jewish flair, which hopefully we'll be able to take note of in the various customs and Old Testament citations. But a more Jewish flair would be like, yeah, I don't care about Noah, goy. I don't care about Adam, goy. I care about Abraham, the first Hebrew, the first Jew, and going through David, which is the scion of the Jewish people. Yeah, so that would definitely be the more Jewish perspective as opposed to this universalist perspective of God.
Mhm. And I also think, right, so we should read Matthew backwards, like in the sense that like he wrote this after the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so that has shaped some of his thinking. And so he wasn't just narrating saying this and this, but he had a very specific agenda in mind. And so
Right,
yes.
and that's why even though on the third group, the ones from the after the deportation until Jesus, while their names even in the time of Jesus
Mhm.
um, were not like I guess well known, or maybe they were. They're just definitely not well known now. I view all three sections, the Abraham to David to Jesus, as arguments. They're arguments of generations that they're trying to present an argument like this is why this guy who you probably heard of Jesus, this is why he's important.
Mhm.
Very.
Okay. So the next thing is, what is the number three? Like I noticed that Matthew he tends to look at these in groups of three. And I again we'll probably look at this later, but I'm intrigued. Like, does number three or groups of three? Does three mean something within
Well,
Judaism?
it's so funny.
Yes, seven
Um,
means perfection, right? Seven means wholeness.
So there's lots of numbers, right? 7, 2, 3, 8, 1, 13. So right now, you're the one who's pointing out that 3 is an important number. If I was going to stop right now, I wouldn't have noticed 3 is an important number. I would say there's 3 epics. That's as clear. But I would say that based on the verse we're going to read, hopefully in 10 seconds, that 14 is the important number. So how about this? Let's read 117, and then we'll probably just stop at 117. So let's try that.
Okay. The Gospel according to Saint Matthew, chapter 1, verse 17. So all the
I
generations.
love the introduction each time. I love it. Like,
At church, if you read the gospel, we will cross our head, our mouth, and our hearts before we read
well,
the.
I'm not. I hope you don't feel that I'm stopping you
No.
from putting any amount of crosses on any part of your body that you feel right now.
Amen. Okay.
Amen.
So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations, and from David to the deportation to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations.
Okay. Wow. There's a lot of questions that we get asked. So the 14 we already dealt with. And I don't know the answer. I
It's
feel
multiples of 7. Does it mean that the 7 means something?
so let's imagine 7 means something because of Sabbath or whatever you want. But why they could have broken Abraham down into 2 sevens and David down 2 sevens and Jesus down 2 sevens.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like 14 is purposeful. Um, Listen, and you can always argue that this is just how many generations there were, but we know that some of them are missing, and we know there's some confusion.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, again, I don't have the Greek in front of me, and we maybe should look at the Koine Greek. But also, it's very interesting how it even has the word all. So all the generations from Abraham until David were 14, and then the other ones don't have the word all. So I don't know what we should make of the fact that it looks like this is something that, like, this is everything that took place, while the other ones were, this is the amount of generations. I think when we counted also the third 14, we could count again, there was only 13. There's only 13, right?
Mm-hmm. 13.
So what? It could be Joseph and Mary are counted as both people of the generation. Because again, if the point of this is to make an argument
Mm-hmm.
that these are the important things, let's be honest, Joseph and Mary are equally important. From that perspective, it could be the generation before Jesus. The two people were Joseph and Mary, not Rabban Gamliel, who's mentioned in the New Testament, not Hillel, not Shammai, but the two people who matter are Mary and Joseph, and a generation is them. It's a weak argument. I wouldn't believe it if I said it, but I am saying it, so I don't know.
Part of me wants to think that Matthew wanted to make things all kind of sound similar, like 14, 14, 14. So I guess he probably he didn't quite see this as being distorting reality. He was more, I don't know, he was trying to show, yeah, it's 13 generations.
Again, like even today, I feel like you could say Christologically, maybe the 14 maybe represents salvation or represents something more important in Christianity today. But I can't think of anything in that time period that by 14 could have been important. And again, I would have said that 14 is not important. If we only had verses 1, 2 through 116, I would have said whatever. Coincidence, 14, 14, 13. But then we have verse 117, where the person goes, by the way, you should know 14 is important. Okay, it's a good question. And then we finish to the end of the verse with the classic, unto the Christ, 14 generations. So now this is the third way that we, or I guess the second, that we have Jesus being referred to. We have 1:1 where we say Jesus Christ. Again, we can look up the Greek. Maybe we'll have the Greek in front of us in the future. But then we have Jesus who is called the Christ. That's the second way. That's in 1:16. And now we have a third thing. From A until B until the Christ is 14. So it's really interesting why we have these differences. I don't have an explanation. You could just say the first time it's we know who he is in 1:1. The second one in 1:16, it's the introduction. And the third one is like, okay, we're here. Let's just call him Christ. But then we see 1:18. We go back to the 1:1 model of he's called Jesus Christ again. So I don't have an explanation for these differences.
So since the time of Jesus, did something happen 14 generations after he was on this earth? Do you know of any world events which probably, I mean, if this trend is true, right?
What is 14 generations? I think I saw that someone said that if you do the amount of verses, amount of years in the book of Daniel, and you do 490 divided by 14, you get 35, and that's a generation. 35 is not really a generation. How do you judge a generation? So, the Stefan Raj family, they have, their parents may not be, even for my own self, it's a really interesting story that my grandfather fought in World War I and was born in the late 19th century. So I always joke around, there's the idea in Judaism that like the closer you are to the theophany at Mount Sinai, like the better you are. So I always joke, I'm one generation closer to Har Sinai, to Mount Sinai, because my grandfather got married after the war. And then he got married late, and then my father was one of the later children. Then my father got married late, and then so all of a sudden we went from 1890 until almost 1990 for kids. It's very uncommon. So what's a generation, Isaac? 35 years. I don't know. Let's say 500 years would be 14 generations later. So what happened in the year 500? I don't know. Again, it's hard to imagine that matters. But again, the goggles I'm always going to put on is like, what does this mean to the people when they heard it? You know, is this like some guy trying to create a new concept? By the way, 14 generations matter. You know, it's possible. It's definitely possible.
I don't know either. So it's probably 14. I figured it's multiples of 7, and 7 is number for wholeness, 7 days. And so I thought maybe he was trying to make them all sound cool, like multiples of 14.
Gospel account according to Matthew. Sounds cool.
Okay.
Okay.
So can we start with 18 today?
Okay. I mean, yeah, sure. We could try it. Let's start it. Go for it.
Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph.
That's a big verse. So
yeah, that's a very big verse. That's a very.
We're not even going to finish the verse today. We'll start. Yeah, how about this? We'll start with our questions before we start, and we'll try to we'll ponder them, and then we'll try to answer some of them. So what questions exist on this?
So in this, right, Matthew introduces a whole new concept, the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit. Now, from the Bible, we know that, again, the Spirit was there, but again, it's the Acts of the Apostles which gave word to the Holy Spirit. But here he calls this the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit. That's one thing. Second thing is this notion that God became man, the incarnation. That's something I've struggled with for quite, like, here's this uncreated being, from an uncreated being to become a created being. Like, we all create things. A carpenter creates some things. As a programmer, we create things, but the creator doesn't become the created being. And I go, what does it mean for the creator of the world to take on a different form, from an uncreated being to become a created being? And thirdly, right, well, this is about Joseph. Maybe we can discuss this the next time.
Okay.
Anyways.
Well, let me also add some more questions. That the first thing is the opening of the verse. I find very problematic or hard to understand. The birth of Jesus happened like this. You know, it's like you know how you've never started a sentence, Isaac. The birth of Isaac happened like this. Mm-hmm. It's just not like, there's no background. Like, literally, I understand maybe you want to say that temporally speaking, the first thing that happened is his conception or pre-birth. But like this, I feel like I'd want to know more about this Jesus guy before all of a sudden I'm jumping into his birth or why I need information about it. So I find this polemical and apologetic almost. Like, why is this the starting point? So this is something I'd like to discuss. So the Hebrew or Greek, when his mother was espoused, that means when she was, I guess, engaged, or when she was in Hebrew, marriage takes place in 2 steps. There's a thing called kedushin, the sanctification of the marriage, and then there's nisuin, the actual marriage. So I think we're supposed to assume that there's these 2 parts of the marriage. Again, I don't know if you would have known this, so I just want to explain. The first half of the marriage, you're legally married, but you're not sleeping together yet. You maybe are kind of trying to build your house together. You're probably not even living in the same house yet. So this is actually like a pre-step. She wouldn't have been fully married to Joseph at this stage, or at least she wouldn't have consummated her marriage. So what's interesting, though, is that at this stage, if you act illicitly and sleep with someone, you would be very, very heavily punished, executed from a biblical perspective. As a reader of this, I would be very surprised to read this, because I would have said that if the Holy Spirit is going to have a baby, it should only be with a not only a virgin, but a woman who's not engaged, not having this higher level of engagement, this level of engagement that counts biblically as marriage. So I would say this is a tremendous problem for a reader who understands biblical Judaism, especially for a reader who understands first century Judaism. It points out before they came together, while she's still a virgin.
Yeah, but okay. So on that note, right? They were betrothed, they were married, but they were not fully married. I mean, they were married in the sense that
it gives the disclaimer, right? Before they had relations.
Okay, so does it matter for you to say? I mean, for you to
it's the opening line.
No. Here's my question. does it matter that she was married to somebody, even though they had consummated this? How does it like? How is that relevant to this?
In Jewish
So,
law,
yeah.
this is different time periods, but definitely at certain times in history, she can be executed for this. If Joseph did not sleep with her at certain time periods, not all, she can be executed. So this is super bad.
I mean, true, right? If this was not the work of the Holy Spirit, then yes, right? That's but this is, and that's and that was my earlier question. Like, what happens when this uncreated being decides or takes a form within the created universe? Like, we have this thing called miracles, and we have like God, and that's that's a Christian concept of incarnation miracles, and miracles do
That.
happen.
I'm saying like historically, I think it's like somewhere in like Deuteronomy 22. Somewhere in there, it says that if you're found to have this illicit,
Yeah.
legitimate union, this relationship, and be viewed as adultery, should be executed.
But that's not been
the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, but that's not been established yet, right? So here
No, it has.
here's this person, she finds herself pregnant.
So according to biblical law in Deuteronomy, she'd be executed for this.
Okay, so true, yes. She again, if this was outside of the norm, she should have been executed. And maybe is that the reason why Matthew insisted that he introduces the third person from the Holy Spirit to clarify that this.
Yeah, 100%. You know, anyone who's seen Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie has other explanations. But so 100%, there is this explanation. So the question is, again, we have to stop in a second, but why is this the first verse? Like anything before 117 and before is like introductory. There's no narrative yet. This is like the first, like the narrator's coming out and he goes, by the way, you should know this.
So okay, so let's look at this from the lens of 1 to 17. Like in that lens, he has the objective to show that Jesus was that Jesus was the Messiah or the Christ, and Jesus was the culmination of all the prophecy.
Zion of David, right?
So over here, right, like what's his objective? Like, did Matthew have a specific objective in mind for him to jump from here to here, or to start in this way? I see what he's saying. This is not, again, this approach or this introduction is not traditional. It's not. It seems very bizarre. But did he have a specific objective in mind, which led him to adopt this particular approach?
Yeah, we're gonna have to guess tomorrow. We're gonna have to guess some of those objectives, Isaac. Yeah. Okay.
But one thing. So one last thing. How did the first century Jews understand, like,
we're gonna have to discuss that tomorrow? It's a good question.
The concept of miracles, right? Like what he's saying is just, it's both miracle and this third person, the Holy Spirit. Like this is a person, it's not mentioned here before he introduces this third person called, but I see third person as the third person within Trinity, as in the Holy Spirit. What did this mean to them? Like, do they have a theology to even understand this Holy Spirit? Like, to understand this being called the Holy Spirit?
Okay, good question.
Okay.